Hey everybody, I'm Emma, and today we're going to talk about archival needs assessments. This webinar is a little bit different than our typical webinars. This is one of Backlog services, and we're gonna walk you through that today. So just a couple of pieces of housekeeping. We'll do a Q&A at the end, and the recording will be emailed. So just until we get to the very end, just stay muted with your microphone off. And then again, we are recording this and I will email it out to everybody later this week. Yeah. So first off, Backlog is my company. We're an archival consulting firm, and we work with anybody from small places who are trying to bring their collections online to larger institutions that need a little bit of outside help. So we do archival consulting, which we do archival needs assessments, which we'll talk about today. We do policy writing, and then we can also help you craft some digitization plans and help you get started with those workflows. We also do genealogy research. So if you have a brick wall you can't get through, if you're trying to just verify if what ancestry hinted is a correct match for your family tree, we can do all sorts of research. And then after you've done your research, we can help you put together a family tree book or do oral history interviews. So basically, I see anything family history as after you've done the research, what form does that take? Okay. So I'm Emma. I started Backlog in 2021 after being laid off during the pandemic. Since then, we've worked with several Midwestern museums. We've also worked with a couple of places out west. So we're not just in the Midwest, but we are based in St. Louis. And this is Jenna, who works with me.
Hi, I'm Jenna. So I'm currently a museum archivist, but for many years before that, I was a university archivist, and I was the only person in my department. So I had to learn how to do everything and how to prioritize and manage projects. So I feel like I've gained more wisdom than I should in the years I spent. So I think I have a lot of failures and successes to share.
So today we're going to talk about, we've got two different types of assessments. We'll talk about how to prepare for an assessment and what we cover in our site visit. And then we always end this whole process with a written report. But first off, before we start, what is an archival needs assessment?
So this service can take many different forms based on what the archive actually needs. It's an opportunity to gain some outside perspectives on your operations, whether it's kind of making some next steps on particular projects, or you're new in your position and you've inherited a room full of stuff and need help getting started. So the assessment provides guidance on applying archival best practice to your institution. Because sometimes when we look at best practices or standards, they can feel really out of reach or not applicable to a particular budget, a particular set of constraints. So we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. So it's always our goal to help institutions do better, get closer to a best practice or a particular standard, because that's always better than doing nothing.
So we have two different types of assessments. We have a comprehensive on-site assessment where I will travel to your museum or institution, and we'll walk through your collections, and we'll do some interviews and talk to all the staff. That's actually a photograph of me last July at the Oklahoma City Memorial and Museum. So it's the museum and memorial for the 1995 bombing. And they have two really large collection storage areas and two staff members that work directly with the collections. And so I spent 2 days with them. We went through two storage areas, kind of looked at cold storage and how everything's stored, and went through their policies and procedures. We also do a remote assessment. This is just a quick 90 minutes, and then we put together some recommendations for you. This is really geared towards smaller places or places that don't have any staff working directly with collections. So you might have a team of volunteers, you might just have one executive director who's kind of running the whole show, and that's kind of who we really cater those remote via Zoom ones to, just to make this accessible for all types of museums.
So an assessment, kind of coming off of that, an assessment is appropriate at any scale. You don't have to reach a certain point in your growth or establishment in order to like qualify or anything. And you might be a volunteer-run community archive, you might be a university or a corporation. And so depending on where you're at and where you want to go, the assessment can take a lot of different forms. So the only thing you have to do to prepare is to give thought to some questions. What do you want to prioritize as part of this experience? What are your goals for your archive? And what are your biggest challenges that you need help overcoming? So there's not, a form to fill out or like a like homework that you have to do ahead of time. It's just really a matter of having an idea of what it is that you want this process to accomplish. Next slide, please.
So kind of the way Backlog looks is you would work with me in person. And so I would be the person coming to your institution, taking meetings with any employees who work with the archives. So any staff that work with the archives, any volunteers, any direct supervisors of the department. So a lot of this is we want to talk to anybody who the archives touches. So if marketing works with the archives, we want to talk to them about how do they use the archives. If you have a development or fundraising arm, we also want to ask how they use the archives. So we really want to see where the archives fits in the whole in the bigger organization. And if you're just a historical society and you just have, your museum collection, we'll talk to all your volunteers or your executive director or your board. We just kind of want to make sure that when we're there, we're understanding how your archive or museum collection can best serve your institution, and that we're creating and we're giving good advice on how we can help you guys reach your goals. And that's me. That's from a couple years ago. That was with one of our first clients, a high school that's over 200 years old, a Jesuit high school here in St. Louis. And I worked one-on-one with these 5 guys from the class of 1963 to kind of help them. They had already set up their archives, but we worked on talking about archival standards and how to best serve the school and do reference requests.
So during the on-site visit, well, I say the royal we, Emma, and then Emma will take notes for me to see. There'll a tour of all your storage areas, whether they're temporary or permanent. And we want to discuss future spaces that might be allocated for record storage. And is your space sufficient, both from, is it actually like area wise big enough? And also, does it have the type of shelving, the environmental conditions, the accessibility that you actually need? And so we'll look at your current space and look to future growth and problems that you might need to address with your space. Next slide, please. But of course, your storage is going to be inside a building, and your building might have a multitude of issues that you might not have control over. So how is your temperature and relative humidity in the building, and is there any monitoring going on to make sure that those are constant and within a good range to prevent things like mold growth? How's the protection from light and water? Are there housekeeping or security concerns? What kind of pest management is needed or is already in place? And emergency preparedness, which will really vary based on where the building is, and what particular environmental threats are most common. Next slide, please. So every single archive has weird stuff that they're not really sure like how to hold it, like how to store it. So we'll talk about any of those weird things that you're not really sure if you're storing it correctly. What's the best type of housing for that type of material? If you've got big film reels or interesting or unusual realia or plant collections or something. So we can make recommendations for improving housing and also noting like this collection is good. You don't need to worry as much about that collection because it's housed appropriately. And we can also assess your handling practices and policies and provide any advice about changes you could make to how you physically, I'm doing a lot of waving and I realize it's not really on camera, but how you actually hold and handle and support when you are using these materials. Next slide, please. So we will also take a look at your arrangement and descriptive practices. What's your organizational system for your archives? Are you separated into archives and special collections? Do you have different sort of sub-repositories that are collecting materials from different sources? And how do you organize all of that? Is it hierarchical? Does everything just have a number? Do the numbers necessarily mean anything? Do they need to mean anything? Or are they just identifiers? And what kind of collection inventories do you have? Do you have finding aids? Do you need finding aids? What kind of intellectual control do you have over your collection and just being aware of what there is? And also, what kind of physical control do you have in terms of location management, being able to say, this is the thing that I know I want. How do I know where it is? And can I be sure that I'm able to go to the shelf and find that particular thing? Next slide, please. And so having good policies and procedures, and by good, I mean like robust and well-reviewed and appropriate to your particular situation, is a really important foundation to operating consistently and with quality operations into the future. So we can make recommendations on your existing policies, as well as make recommendations for things that you should really write. So things like your access policy, like who can access your collection, what's the procedure for someone doing that, what are your rules for your reading room or reading space, your copyright and reproduction, rules for someone who wants to use some of your materials, collection development, and any sort of, it really depends on your situation and the types of audiences that you serve. So we can suggest missing documentation, and perhaps in future consultations, actually you can contract Backlog to help you write some of those. And that's not part of this particular process because any of your policies are going to have to be approved and possibly finessed by your governance structure. So like your board of directors, or whatever that structure looks like for your organization. But we can get you a lot of the way there. And there are many examples out there of different types of policies, and that we can at least point you toward some of those resources. Next slide, please. Digitization can feel really overwhelming, especially if you don't necessarily have the technology or the expertise in-house. So we will evaluate any current digitization projects that you have going on against industry standards. And we can suggest equipment or software that you might need, where to actually make your investments. And we can guide the archive in prioritizing what collections to digitize, what will be of most use to your community, what materials are perhaps deteriorating and really shouldn't be handled. And we can help write easy to follow instructions in the future, so that you can actually have a standard digitization process for not just making digital scans of something, but creating metadata as well. So that could lead to a future contract where we would help write those materials. Next slide, please. So if you have if you have digital records, perhaps from digitization or born digital records, we can review your current practices and make suggestions regarding how you're going about collecting those materials and describing them. We can identify gaps between your kind of desired situation with your digital archives and what you've got going on right now. So maybe you've got everything in, say, a Google Drive, but you know that that's not a great permanent solution. So you might want to move towards something a bit more permanent with more digital preservation security. So we can identify some of those gaps. So you can try to find a I guess, more productive way forward. And we can review your long-term storage plans for your digital materials. Next slide, please. So when all of this is done, we will work on a report. So Em and I both work on the writing of the report, and the report is useful in kind of two timelines. So first, it's an action plan. It will outline next steps that you should immediately take. So what your priorities should be, any investments that you might need to make, suggestions about types of housing that you might need to replace. And depending on your situation, perhaps it's address the storage of a particular collection or rehouse this thing. Next slide, please. And then the report is also designed to be useful into the future as a reference that you can continually look at. So we want to connect your archives to professional concepts and standards and give guidelines for the physical preservation of your collection. And we do cite what our advice is. So we link the report to published professional texts and resources. So things like advice from the Society of American Archivists or the Northeast Document Conservation Center, or the Library of Congress. So it's not just us. You can trust that it's not just us like making stuff up, I guess. And if perhaps we give some advice related to one type of material that you are storing, like say audio reels. But then later on you end up having to worry about like video reels as well. But you see, oh, well, they've cited this resource from the Library of Congress. So I know that I can go to that source and find more information that's relevant, and that it is trustworthy information. So you can refer to the report moving forward after you've moved past those immediate action items. Next slide.
So our archival needs assessment is usually a 2-month process. I like to kind of speak to whoever's we're requesting the assessment, and we set goals and we set up a schedule of meetings before I come on site, or before we do that Zoom. And then after the site visit, we provide 2 follow-up Zooms. It takes us about 3 to 4 weeks to compile the report. And we always schedule one meeting exactly 1 week after I send you the report, so we can kind of walk through everything, make sure you understand the advice we're giving, so I can clarify anything. And then about a month later, we do another follow-up Zoom so we can answer any questions. So I found this to be helpful in the past when we've been brought in to ask, are our folders are archival up to archival standards? Can we store things in this kind of plastic? And in this particular case, the answer was no, you really need to upgrade to archival grade storage. And this gave that group some time to order supplies and ask us questions once they started rehousing things. And so within that report, we had given them kind of like a grocery list of things to buy for their archives. And then in that second Zoom, we were able to walk them through how to actually rehouse things. So it's really helpful to have that first Zoom to kind of walk through everything. And then about a month in, to do another Zoom when you're kind of in the thick of it and need to clarify anything. Okay. And then so the report is really meant to be a standalone service where we can, it's a pretty dense report where we can give you all of this guidance, and you're more than welcome to use the resources we've given you and to execute it on your own. But if you do want to upgrade, like how you're, like if you want to move all of your archival data from Excel into a CMS, we can help you with that. We can also do employee or volunteer training via Zoom. We've done several digitization trainings via Zoom. So really kind of helping setting up that process of capturing metadata when we do digitize photographs, things like that. So this isn't just supposed to be a here you go, figure it out on your own. We can actually walk you through the next steps. So if you want to learn a little bit more about archival needs assessments, and we do other things. So if you already know what you need help with, we're happy to jump right in. But archival needs assessment kind of felt really jargony, so I thought we should do a webinar explaining it. But if you head to our case studies part of our website, so backlog-archivists.com, and then if you go to the case studies tab, it'll kind of talk about through some of the projects we've done, and kind of give you a better example of the work that we can do. All right, so if you're interested in talking to us a little bit more, learning about how this would look, feel free to give me an email. Shoot me an email. It's just my name it's emma@backlog-archivist.com. And we went through this pretty quickly. So we'll do questions in just a second. But again, Backlog's the name of my company. We do archival consulting, genealogy research, and then any family history projects. Our next more informative webinar will be next month on the 22nd. Jenna will lead us through what's your damage. So she's going to talk about Jenna, do you want to talk just a little bit about?
Yeah. So I'm
Okay.
going to talk about identify when you know something is wrong, identifying what is damaging your collections and maybe how to address it. I'm not going to get into conservation or anything like that, but it's like, oh, there's a weird stain on this paper. Do I need to worry about that? Or I saw a bug. How do I feel about that? And a little bit about just what to do so you don't panic, and what is normal age and what is something that you need to worry about with your archival collections.
And then in September, we're going to talk about open source software and why archives choose non-proprietary ones. So hopefully they outlive us. And then if you are interested in some of our previous webinars, you want some more informative ones, you can visit our YouTube channel, and it's just Backlog Archivists. And we've done some research ones and then some archives-based webinars. And so if anybody has a question, feel free to unmute. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about the things we cover in the assessment, or if you have questions about the process, we're happy to answer them. Yeah. And so when we do these assessments, I'm the one that you will talk to. I come on site, and then Jenna sometimes is in the follow-up Zooms. And then we also have a digital archivist that works with us as well. So you're getting a lot of expertise, even though I'm the only person you're seeing. It helps when we can give you a whole panel of experts.
Yeah, this is Judith.
Hi.
Hi. I'm the president of the Historical Society, so I am not totally keyed in on archiving, but we are in the initial phases of redoing our archives. So my question is, it says this meeting is being recorded. I'm assuming you're going to send that to us so that I can give this information or this Zoom presentation to my archivist committee?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm recording it and we'll put it on the Backlog YouTube this week. And then I will also email out a link to everybody. So you'll see it in your email later this week.
Okay, that's great. And then the Zoom, you have an in-person review. You also have a Zoom, and I assume those are different prices.
Yes, they are. And that's
Okay.
something that we can talk more about over the phone.
Okay, that would be great. Then I will pass this information on to people who know more about it and know more about what they need. And hopefully we can have some sort of interaction.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Emma.
Yeah. Hi, Karen.
Hi. I work with Judith at the Archival Historical Society. I think one of the challenges that we have is we're a 50-plus-year-old organization, and we've accumulated a lot of paper. And we need to organize it and maybe cull through things. And one of the big questions that we need better understanding of is what is really historically significant versus interesting, or, what should we be saving versus not saving?
Yeah, and that's something that I have experience dealing with at my day job. So that is something that definitely an assessment could help address.
And one policy that does exist for like archives and, like museums in general is a collection development plan or policy. And collection development just means what do we want to focus on and what do we want to keep? And it really defines the scope of what you're collecting. And so one of my first internships was with the Historical Society, and they had somebody's collection of dolls. And dolls had nothing to do with the local history, and so they decided to deaccession them. But it also freed up like 2 huge rooms where they could put things that did pertain to local history. And so kind of outlining that. Does that answer your question, Karen?
Yeah, we had a collection development policy and they just rewrote it, but they tend to be so broad. I mean, we collect anything pertaining to Arvada's history. It's just so broad, and we're small, so we can't realistically do that. And we have both paper archives and tons of artifacts that are in storage that eventually we're going to have to address as well, because they're not at our facility, and we may face the day where we lose that storage space.
Yeah, that's a really good topic, kind of what Jenna talked about how to prepare. That's kind of like, hey, this is our problem. We have too much stuff and not enough room, even though that's a very common problem. That's definitely something we could help you guys address.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And then we've got a hand raised if you want to go ahead.
Hi, I'm a museum study student and taking elective class in library science. I have a general question about the Backlog Archivist. Did you offer any internship or volunteer or accept volunteer work?
Why don't you go ahead and shoot me an email?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. Mary, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm an archivist for our, we own a historic property. I'm a daughter of the American Revolution. Wisconsin is where we're at. We own a historic property. We change administration every 3 years, so there's quite a bit of turnover. And we use a software program right now called Past Perfect to collect our, keep all of our data and stuff. And I'm running into issues of documents not being labeled and documented correctly. Is that something you could help us look at? Because what we found out in the past is that when the DAR ladies didn't want to keep something or couldn't sell it at a garage sale, they just dropped it off at our historic property. And some of these pieces don't fit into the time frame of the surgeon's quarters log cabin that we own, and it's hard to get these ladies to let go of things. So we kind of need to develop kind of basically a collections development on what we should have and what we should not have. And we like using the program that we have, but I think I need a little bit more guidance in the collection development side of things. Is that something you could help us with?
Yeah. And I've worked with lots of places that use Past Perfect, small museums, big museums. It's really surprising how many people are on it. And one thing that I have found with Past Perfect is consistency is key. And so if you had somebody, who wasn't labeling things properly, that can cause problems for years to come. And so that's something that we could kind of walk through with you. And then also, yes, I feel like everybody just gets things dropped at their back door, and that they think that they're stuck with them forever. We actually did a really cool webinar. Was it last fall, Jenna? It was called Found in Collection. And it was just, how do you address stuff in your collection where you have absolutely zero idea where it came from? And I think like Jenna, wasn't it like, it doesn't have to be accessioned, you know, if you don't know where it came from, it doesn't technically, yeah, so there's a lot of that.
Depends.
What?
Yeah,
I said it depends.
we've had a lot of items that have been assessed and then should not have been, that don't fit the time frame of the property that we own. And to get these ladies to let go of it, sometimes it's like pulling eye teeth, because, you know, it's just, we have a library that has over 1,500 books in it. None of them are, well, I shouldn't say that. Some are not relevant. Most are not relevant to the property. And it's hard to get these little ladies to let go of things, but we need to come up with some kind of collections development. I know, so we can put that out there and say, if it doesn't fit in this parameter, we shouldn't have it. We have a historical society in town. We have a couple other societies that we have items that belong to them. And I don't think we should be keeping them, but I have to have a good cause to try and get rid of them and pass them along to where they belong.
All right. Yeah, so why don't you shoot, if you can send me an email, or I'll connect with you after the webinar.
Okay.
That's definitely something we can help you with.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? You can go ahead and unmute if there are. Okay. So as we said before, I've been recording this. I will post it to our YouTube channel later this week, and then I will also email it out to everybody. But thank you for joining us, joining Jen and I this evening, and to learn more about Backlog and this service. And then please join us in July for What's Your Damage? Mold comes in all kinds of colors, as we have learned. But thank you for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and end our webinar here this evening.